What would you do if a boy walked into your diner every morning, alone, silent, and clearly hungry, but never ordered a thing? Most people looked away. One waitress didn't. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. But what started as a quiet act of kindness would soon draw the attention of strangers, critics, and eventually the US military. And what they told her changed everything. Because sometimes the smallest decisions, made without applause, hold the power to rewrite someone's life. This is the story of a booth by the window, a plate of eggs, and a boy who was never truly invisible. At 7:26 a.m., the door chime at Louis' Grill echoed faintly through the near-empty diner. A boy walked in, skinny frame, oversized hoodie, shoes barely holding together. He moved quietly, head low, slipping into the same booth near the window. Third week in a row, same time, same spot. Always alone. Claire Anderson, 29, had been working the morning shift since she dropped out of community college 4 years ago. She wasn't the chatty type, but she noticed things. Especially this boy. He never ordered food, just water. Sat for 15 minutes, then left without a word. That morning, Claire paused behind the counter a little longer than usual. Watched as he cupped his hands around the glass of ice water like it was warm soup. She grabbed a plate, filled it with scrambled eggs, toast, and a few slices of bacon. Walked over, placed it in front of him, and said calmly, "Kitchen made an extra. You want it?" He froze. His hands hovered over the fork. Then a slow, almost guilty nod. Claire didn't ask his name, didn't push for small talk. She simply refilled his water when it got low and cleared the plate when he was done. He whispered "thank you" before slipping out the door. The next day, she did it again. This time, she told him the omelet had onions, and no one wanted it. Day after that, she accidentally made 2 stacks of pancakes. Some of her coworkers raised eyebrows. One customer, an older man with a business suit, muttered something about freeloaders. But Claire just kept serving. She had known that kind of hunger once. The kind that didn't just empty your stomach, but made your body feel like it didn't belong anywhere. That kind of hunger doesn't need an explanation. It needs a seat. And sometimes, just one person who notices. As the boy left that Friday morning, Claire wiped down the table and placed a folded napkin on the seat. No words written, just a quiet promise. She'd be there again tomorrow, and as the door closed behind him, the chime faded, but the silence felt different. Not heavy, just waiting. Claire never told the others what she was doing. She didn't explain why an extra plate of waffles kept landing on the boy's table, or why her tip jar emptied a little faster each week. She just did it. Quietly, steadily. The boy never said much either. He'd look up, nod politely, eat slowly, and disappear before the breakfast rush. It became a silent rhythm between them, unspoken but understood. Some of the staff started whispering. Mia, the server who worked the mid-morning shift, asked her one day, "You know the kid?" Claire only replied, "I don't need to." A couple of regulars noticed too. One of them, a retired banker named Richard, shook his head and muttered, "This isn't a charity." Another left a note on the receipt, "Foods for paying customers." Claire read it once, crumpled it, and tossed it in the trash. But the boy kept showing up. And so did the plates. She began leaving little extras, an apple wrapped in a napkin, a small chocolate she'd bought with her own money. She never asked where he lived or why he was alone. She just looked at him the way she wished someone had looked at her back then. Not with pity, but with quiet respect. Older customers like Jean, a 71-year-old widow who sat near the door every Thursday, noticed something else. She told Claire, "He doesn't just eat, he exhales, like this is the only place he breathes normal." Claire didn't respond, but her eyes said everything. There were mornings the boy didn't come. Claire would still set a place anyway, just in case. The other waitresses rolled their eyes, but she didn't care. For her, this wasn't about being nice. It was about memory, about knowing what it feels like when no one makes room for you. And so the quiet continued, table by table, plate by plate. No questions, no stories. Just a kid and a woman who remembered what it meant to be invisible and chose not to let it happen again. That Tuesday, as Claire wiped down the counter, the bell above the door rang. The boy stepped in, thinner than before, his hoodie now torn at the sleeve. But his eyes searched the room and paused at the plate already waiting for him. He didn't smile. He just sat down. And that, to Claire, was enough. The trouble started on a rainy Wednesday. Claire had just poured hot coffee for the early birds when Mark, the diner manager, pulled her aside near the kitchen. He didn't lower his voice. "Claire, we've got inventory reports. You've been handing out meals we didn't charge. That's not how we run things here." She didn't argue, just wiped her hands on her apron and said, "I pay for it. Check the register drawer if you want." Mark's tone hardened. "It's not just about the money, it's the principle. You feed one, others will follow. We can't afford to be the neighborhood pantry." Claire held his gaze. "We already are, just not officially." That night, she counted every single tip she earned, fives, ones, coins. Then she slid them into a small envelope and dropped it in the register before closing. The next morning she waited, but the boy didn't come. She kept the plate warm for a while, checked the window 3 times. Nothing. By 8:15, she wrapped the toast in foil and placed it in the back of the fridge. He didn't show the next day either. Or the day after. By the end of the week, the booth by the window remained untouched. Some coworkers snickered, assuming the boy had found another free ride elsewhere. Claire stayed quiet. She still cracked eggs each morning, laid out the napkin just the same. She didn't know where he'd gone, and the not knowing felt like a bruise that wouldn't fade. Older customers like Howard, a retired postal worker who read the paper at the counter every morning, noticed. "You still making food for that boy?" he asked gently. Claire nodded. "He might come back?" Howard didn't say more. But the next day, he left a $5 bill on the table with no order. Just a post-it note that read, "For the empty seat." Claire placed that 5 next to her own tips and cooked anyway, because this wasn't about rules anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. It was about not letting someone go unseen, and somewhere between the silence and the hope, the booth remained waiting. Quiet, warm, and ready. It started with a photo. Someone had snapped a picture of Claire placing food in front of the empty booth. No boy in sight, just her, a full plate, and an unspoken gesture. The post went up on social media with a caption that read, "Rosie's new breakfast program, Feed the Imaginary." Laughter followed, comments too, some sarcastic, some cruel. By the afternoon, one of Claire's coworkers showed her the post. "You're going viral," she said, chuckling. But Claire didn't laugh. She stared at the screen for a long time, then handed the phone back. That night, the diner felt colder. The same coffee, the same chairs. But something had shifted. Claire didn't prepare a plate the next morning. She just stood by the window, arms crossed, waiting for the usual chime that never came. She started questioning herself. Had she made it worse for the boy? Had the attention driven him further away? Was she just playing savior in a story she had no right to touch? Back home, Claire pulled an old box from the top shelf of her closet. Inside were yellowed letters, army patches, and a leather-bound journal belonging to her father, Staff Sergeant Jonathan Anderson. She hadn't opened it in years. Not since the funeral. Flipping through the pages, she paused on an entry written during his last deployment. "Shared my rations with a local kid again. Skinny thing. Looked like he hadn't eaten in days. Jenkins said I was being soft, but I remember being that kid once. Hungry doesn't ask permission." Claire closed the journal, her fingers lingering on the edge. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Her father had never talked much about the war, but this one sentence hit her harder than any post online. She wasn't imagining the boy, and she wasn't doing something foolish. She was carrying something forward. A memory. A code. That night, she returned to the diner alone. Turned on the lights, fried 2 eggs, toasted bread, wrapped the food neatly in foil, then she left it on the back counter with a note. "For when you come back." She didn't know if the boy would ever return, but she knew why she'd fed him. And that, after everything, still mattered. It was the 23rd day. Rain had stopped but left the streets wet and shining. The usual clatter filled Louie's grill, coffee cups clinking, forks tapping plates, conversations murmuring low. Claire was wiping down the counter when the air shifted. The diner fell strangely quiet. The door opened, and 4 black SUVs pulled up to the curb. Out stepped uniformed men, not rushed, not loud, just certain. Leading them was a tall man in a dark green service coat, decorated but understated. He removed his hat as he entered, scanning the room until his eyes met Claire's. "Miss Anderson?" he asked gently. She nodded. "I'm Colonel Raymond Briggs, United States Army. I'm here on behalf of the Department of Defense." He reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This is for you, and I'd like a moment of your time." The room went silent. No one moved. Claire took the envelope with both hands, her fingers trembling slightly. She opened it, eyes scanning the typed words, the signature at the bottom. Then, carefully folded inside, a handwritten letter in neat block print. "To the woman at the diner who fed my son." She looked up, confused. Colonel Briggs spoke softly. "The boy's name is Adam Thompson. He's the son of Master Sergeant James Thompson, killed in action 3 months ago in Afghanistan." Claire blinked. Her breath caught in her chest. "He didn't know," the colonel continued. "Didn't know his wife had left the country. Didn't know Adam had been living alone. But in his last letter to the department, Sergeant Thompson made a request. He asked that if anyone ever found out someone had helped his boy while he was gone, that we find them and thank them." The letter had only a few lines. Simple words, no embellishments. "If someone fed my son, treated him like a person, not a burden, I need them to know I'm grateful. I didn't get to be there, but maybe they were." Claire couldn't speak. She folded the paper carefully like something sacred. The colonel nodded, then stepped aside. Behind him a young boy stepped in, thinner, paler. But it was him. Adam. He looked at Claire, hesitant, but this time his eyes didn't lower. Claire took a step forward, knees unsteady. He whispered, "I didn't know where else to go." She didn't say, "I told you it was okay." She just said, "Welcome back." That evening, after the SUVs had pulled away and the last customer had paid, Claire sat alone at the corner booth, holding the letter again. The paper was creased now, edges soft from her fingers, but the words still held their weight. "If someone fed my son, treated him like a person, not a burden, I need them to know I'm grateful. I didn't get to be there, but maybe they were." She read the sentence slowly over and over. There was no decoration, no dramatic ending. Just clarity. A father, far from home, trying to prepare for the unthinkable. Trusting that somewhere, a stranger might do what he no longer could. Claire imagined him, Master Sergeant James Thompson, writing those words in a tent or bunker, miles from his son, maybe with dirt on his boots, maybe with the sound of helicopters above. A man in uniform, carrying a picture of a boy he hadn't seen in months, writing not to the government, not to a program, but to whoever was kind enough to see his son as human. That letter filled the silence between Claire and the boy more than any conversation ever could. When she came into work the next day, Adam was already there. He sat with both hands wrapped around a cup of cocoa, waiting. She didn't ask where he'd been or how he had survived. He didn't offer it. Instead, she slid into the seat across from him. He said, "I didn't know my dad wrote that." She said, "He knew someone would be looking out for you." He nodded, then added, almost a whisper, "I thought no one saw me." Claire didn't rush to correct him. She didn't say, "I did." Instead, she reached across the table and placed the letter in front of him. He stared at it, eyes tracing the lines as if they were written in another language. That day, she didn't serve him food. She just sat with him. And in that silence, the distance between father and son, between a soldier's fear and a woman's choice, closed by just a little. The story could have ended there. But in towns like this, stories don't stay quiet. By the end of the week, people started showing up, not for the food, but for the seat. Adam's booth. No one sat in it, not out of fear, but out of respect. Claire tried to keep things normal, but it was too late. A local journalist had been in the diner that morning. He didn't ask many questions. He just watched, listened, then wrote a quiet piece titled, "The Woman Who Fed a Ghost Until He Came Back." It spread. People began sending letters, cards, some with $20 bills tucked inside. Veterans came in quietly, ordered coffee, and left challenge coins on the counter, military tokens never given lightly. One older man, a Marine in his 70s, simply nodded at Claire and said, "My grandson could have been him." Claire never made a speech. She didn't give interviews, but the diner changed. Jean, the widow who always ordered half a grapefruit, brought in a group from her church to start a Saturday breakfast for families of deployed soldiers. Howard, the old postal worker, began showing up early to wipe tables before the rush. Mia, once skeptical, started slipping extra biscuits to kids who came in with tired eyes and dirty jackets. Then someone suggested a plaque. It was small, brass, placed right at the center of Adam's booth. It read, This seat once fed more than hunger. It didn't explain everything. It didn't need to. To those who knew, it was enough. And to people like Frank, an 82-year-old Air Force veteran who lost his son in Iraq, it was a place to exhale. Frank hadn't spoken about his grief in 10 years. But sitting in that booth, he told Claire, "I never said thank you to the nurse who held my boy's hand at the end. You made me feel like maybe someone did." Louis' Grill didn't get bigger. It didn't become a franchise, but it became something harder to build. It became a place where silence was allowed, but not loneliness. And in the middle of it all, Claire kept wiping tables, pouring coffee, and refilling Adam's booth, even when it was empty, because some seats aren't meant to be filled. They're meant to be remembered. Mark wasn't an unkind man. He was a manager, which meant he saw numbers first: plates sold, margins held, time clocked in and out. But over the next few weeks, something in him began to shift. He started noticing what didn't show up in spreadsheets, like how Jean brought in extra groceries every Friday, or how customers began leaving without change, not by accident, but by choice. He saw Claire pay for a stranger's meal without blinking. Saw Adam, now sitting with better posture, bringing in a comic book to show her. The diner hadn't made more money, but somehow it felt fuller. One morning, Mark called a staff meeting. Not his usual clipped 10-minute update. This time, he cleared his throat and unfolded a piece of paper. "This isn't official policy," he said, "but it's going up on the wall. From today on, whoever you are, whatever you can pay, no one leaves here hungry." There was silence. Then Mia, standing by the dish rack, gave a quiet nod. Mark didn't explain further. He didn't need to. What had started as one woman's quiet decision had become something woven into the walls. People like Dolores, a 67-year-old retired factory worker, noticed the change. She'd been coming to Louis for years, usually alone. She told Claire one morning, "I used to come here for the eggs. Now I come to feel less invisible." Outside, someone had chalked the sidewalk with a simple phrase: "Kindness served here." The diner didn't hang a banner. There were no donation jars, just a quiet code, passed dish by dish, table by table. And for the first time in years, Claire felt like she wasn't just working a job. She was holding a line. A soft, firm line against a world that too often looked away. The letter arrived 2 weeks later, handwritten, folded with care. No return address, just "For Miss Claire," scrawled neatly on the envelope. Inside, the writing was careful, each word spaced out, as if chosen with intention. "Dear Claire, thank you for not asking me questions I didn't know how to answer. Thank you for calling me a person, not a problem. I used to think grown-ups only saw me when I did something wrong. But you saw me when I was quiet, when I was scared. My dad used to say real heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear aprons and carry plates. You were mine. Adam." Claire folded the letter slowly, pressing it flat. Then she slipped it inside her father's journal, next to his wartime entry about sharing food with a boy he didn't know. 2 lives. 2 meals, a thread that crossed continents and decades. From that day on, Adam didn't just come for breakfast. He came early, sometimes helping her prep coffee or carry dishes. He spoke more, smiled more, sat longer. The silence that once hung around him had loosened its grip. The diner carried on, plates clinking, boots scuffing the floor, sun rising behind the glass window by Adam's booth. But something lingered in the air now, a quiet kind of reverence. One Saturday, a man in uniform walked in. He wasn't young. His left hand was missing. He left a small medal on the table without saying a word, then nodded to Claire on his way out. Another afternoon, a group of veterans passed through on their way to a reunion. They didn't stay long, just long enough to take a photo at the booth and pay for 3 families' meals before leaving. Claire never chased recognition. But somehow, the story of what she did, what she didn't say, what she didn't demand, kept echoing outward, through the people who passed by, through those who quietly decided to do something kind that day, through a boy who no longer looked at the floor when he spoke. One morning, Claire walked to the front of the diner and saw a small crowd gathered outside. They weren't customers, just neighbors, teachers, former soldiers, people who had read the story and wanted to leave something: flowers, coins, letters. One note simply read, "I was hungry once, and someone saw me too." She stepped inside, started the coffee, set the tables, and at 7:26 a.m., as always, Adam walked in. No fanfare, No applause, just a quiet nod. And Claire, already holding a plate, said, "You're early." In the booth by the window, the morning sun hit just right. Not warm, not cold, just steady. Because sometimes the most lasting stories aren't about rescue. They're about recognition, and the lives we quietly hold up without ever needing to be seen. In life, the most powerful acts often happen in silence, not through grand speeches, but through quiet, steady compassion. The story of Claire and Adam reminds us that kindness doesn't need to be loud or recognized to matter. In a world that often rushes past pain and labels people as problems, simply seeing someone, truly seeing them, can be life-changing. For those who have faced hardship, been overlooked, or judged by their appearance or silence, this story strikes a deep chord. It teaches us that dignity can be restored not through systems, but through individual choices. Claire didn't save the world, she just chose not to look away, and that choice became a turning point in a young boy's life. The lesson here is clear. You don't need a uniform or a title to do something meaningful. Sometimes it's enough to offer a warm meal, a moment of presence, or a quiet place to belong. These small acts ripple outward. They tell someone they matter. They remind the rest of us that no one is truly invisible when compassion becomes a habit. And that, even in the most ordinary places, humanity can still surprise us. Claire never asked to be seen. Adam never needed saving. But between them something powerful happened. Trust was restored. Not through grand gestures, but through quiet choices made at the right time. This isn't a story about miracles. It's a reminder. Some acts of kindness don't need to echo. They just need to exist, and the world will pause to notice. In a country where people can feel lost inside systems and forgotten in silence, there are still diners, still waitresses, still ordinary people who choose to do what's right, even when no one is watching. And that's how dignity survives, not through noise, but through small, steady acts of courage. If you've ever witnessed someone kind being dismissed, or if you felt overlooked simply because you stayed quiet, comment 1. If you believe that quiet kindness can still change a life, even when no one gives it credit, comment 2. And if this story moved you, subscribe for more real human stories, because the world needs more of what's true.